My father didn't shout when he tried to erase me. He just leaned back in the chair at my own dining table, looked me in the eye, and said, "It's your duty to pay for her wedding." My mother folded her napkin as if this were etiquette and not execution. Brooke, my little sister, kept that soft, satisfied smile she wears when someone else is about to lose so she can win. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I stood up, pushed my chair in, and said the calmest sentence I've ever spoken. "You have 24 hours to leave my house." That was the moment everything shifted. My name is Daisy. For most of my life, I thought keeping the peace was the same as keeping a family. I was the kid who learned early how to stay quiet, how to handle things myself, how to never be a problem. When other kids begged their parents for rides to dances, I stocked shelves at a corner store so I could save for my first community college class. My parents, Arthur and Evelyn, liked to tell people they raised an independent daughter. What they never mentioned was that independence wasn't something they nurtured. It was a survival skill I had to grow. Then there was Brooke. She floated through childhood like the world owed her a soft landing. She always got the bigger bedroom, the nicer things, the loud praise, the gentle excuses. When Arthur lost his accounting job 3 years ago, they showed up at my doorstep with 2 suitcases and an unspoken expectation that my success would be their safety net. They said it would be temporary. Temporary somehow became them settling into my home so thoroughly it stopped feeling like mine. The night they arrived, my mother walked straight into my kitchen and began rearranging drawers. She didn't ask. She didn't look up. She said, "You'll thank me, dear. Efficiency matters." Arthur took over my home office within an hour, claiming he needed the space for a job search I never saw him conduct. Brooke walked into my master bedroom, spun in a slow circle, and said, "This feels more like my vibe." By the end of the week, I was in the old guest room on a narrow bed I once bought for friends. Bills doubled, then tripled. Someone kept adjusting the thermostat to a comfortable 72, as if I were running a resort. My car was borrowed without permission. Groceries vanished as soon as I set them down. When I gently tried to talk about shared expenses, Evelyn patted my hand and said, "Family takes care of family." Funny how family always seemed to mean me taking care of them. Even outside the house, the story twisted. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, pulled me aside one afternoon. "Your parents told me it's been hard on you financially," she whispered. The truth was impossible to ignore, but I kept telling myself to endure it. That's what good daughters do, right? They stretch, they bend, they make room. 6 months ago, I started sessions with Dr. Liu, and someone finally named what was happening: financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and a lifetime of conditioning that made me think this was normal. I wasn't ready to confront anyone yet, but I started noticing everything, every entitled comment, every whispered look, every time Brooke acted like my house was her kingdom. I knew something was coming. The shift arrived in small, almost invisible fractures, the kind you only notice after someone teaches you how to look. Dr. Liu told me, "You've been trained to normalize chaos. Start paying attention to the details you've been taught to ignore." So I did, and once I started, I couldn't stop. It began with the bills. One Saturday morning, I sat at the dining table, the same one I used to eat takeout at after late nights at the firm, and opened the stack of payments I'd been avoiding. Electric, water, groceries, gas, household supplies. Every line had nearly doubled since the day my family moved in. I added the totals twice, then a third time. The numbers didn't lie. I was financially supporting 3 adults who acted like I owed them the lifestyle they'd grown comfortable with. While I was calculating, Brooke walked through barefoot, scrolling her phone. She didn't ask what I was doing. She didn't glance at the bills. She opened my fridge, grabbed the sparkling water I'd been saving for myself, and said, "We're low on groceries again. Can you do a store run today?" No offer to come along. No awareness she'd bought groceries in 3 years. Another cracked dot, then Noah, Brooke's fiance, showed up. He stood in my doorway holding a small box of pastries, trying to be polite. Can I talk to you for a second, Daisy? He asked, shifting nervously. We stepped out onto the porch. He cleared his throat. Brooke's really excited about the wedding. Your parents mentioned you might help with some of the expenses. I stared at him, stunned my family had already planned how to spend my money. Why would they say that I asked? He hesitated. I think they assumed you'd want to contribute since you're stable. Stable? Not successful, not hardworking, just stable. The euphemism people use when they think you have endless capacity to absorb responsibility. Another crack, one loud enough Noah heard it. He apologized before he left, genuinely confused. Then came the day Brooke took my car without asking. When she returned, the passenger seat was stained with makeup. Fast food wrappers littered the floor and the gas tank light was blinking. I confronted her gently. Brooke, can you give me a heads up next time you need the car? She blinked like I'd spoken an unfamiliar language. Relax, Daisy. You barely go anywhere. And it's not like you can't afford gas. The entitlement was breathtaking. But the worst moments weren't the big ones. They were the quiet, everyday reminders that this house was no longer mine. Evelyn moving my clothes to a different closet because she needed more space. Arthur telling guests, our house gets great. Natural light, as if he paid a single month of the mortgage. Brooke sprawled across my couch, shoes on the coffee table. Every time I walked my own hallway, I felt like a ghost haunting a life I built out, and yet my voice stayed silent. My boundaries stayed soft. My fear of being the ungrateful daughter kept me frozen until one night in therapy. Dr. Leo leaned forward and said, they're not confused, Daisy. They're benefiting. That truth hit harder than any argument. It reframed every memory, every sacrifice, every apology I'd made on their behalf. The undercurrents weren't undercurrents anymore. They were rising loud, impossible to ignore. Something was coming. Something big dot had happened on a Sunday night. Nights that used to mean family and comfort had become performances, stages where my parents played the roles. They wanted the world to believe. I cooked as usual because it was easier than listening to Brooke complain about the seasoning. I made roasted chicken, vegetables, and a simple salad. Nothing fancy. Something to quiet the tension for one meal. I felt it the moment they sat down, a hum in the room like a storm gathering. Brooke's smile was too sweet to be rehearsed. Arthur's stare lingered a beat too long. Evelyn smoothed her napkin, eyes darting between us. We ate in silence for several minutes. I tried to breathe normally. Then Arthur cleared his throat, one of those heavy, performative clears. Daisy, he began, we need to talk about the wedding. There it was, the storm door cracked open. What about it? I asked. Before he could answer, Evelyn jumped in, her smile tight. We've all been thinking how important this moment is for Brooke. A wedding deserves to be done right. Brooke's fork scraped her plate as she cut into chicken. Her eyes were trained on me. Arthur leaned forward. It's your duty to help your sister. The word duty hit me like a cold hand around my neck. How much are we talking? I asked. Brooke answered, as casually as if asking me to pass the salt. 28,000, 28,000. My emergency fund? Years of work, the only safety net I had. Arthur's voice hardened. Family deserves investment. If you won't disappear from here forever, I asked quietly. His look was dead serious. Then you need to contribute to the family. My breath left me in one sharp exhale. Disappear from my own home? The home I paid for while they'd been living rent-free for 3 years. Brooke didn't blink. She smiled, small, smug, victorious. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, not violently. It was a quiet, precise break, like the split of thin glass. For a long moment, no one spoke. They waited for me to apologize for not agreeing fast enough. Brooke twirled her wine glass, humming under her breath. All I could think was, they really believe I exist to serve them. Dr. Leo's voice echoed in my head. They're not confused. They're benefiting. I set my fork down. My hand no longer trembled. For the first time in years, my heartbeat slowed instead of racing. My body stilled. My mind cleared. I stood up. Evelyn's eyes widened. Arthur rose. Brooke tilted her head, almost amused. I looked at each of them, letting the silence stretch until even Brooke's smirk faltered. Then, in the calmest voice I've ever had, I said, "You have 24 hours to leave my house." The room snapped. Arthur shot to his feet, ungrateful. He began. I raised a hand. He stopped mid-sentence. Evelyn gasped, hand over her mouth. Brooke's smile vanished, replaced by shock, then rage. "You can't be serious," she said. "I am," I said. "You have until tomorrow evening. After that, I'm changing the locks." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I walked out of the room, out of the guilt, the obligation, the lifetime of shrinking myself. Behind me, I heard Brooke whisper, "She's lost it." Arthur muttered something about respect. Evelyn sobbed into her napkin. None of it mattered. The storm had finally broken, and for once, I wasn't the one drowning. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid of what I'd done, but because for the first time in 3 years, the house felt like it belonged to me again. Every creak in the floorboards, every hum of the heater, every shadow on the wall reminded me that this was my space. Not a stage for someone else's entitlement at 2 a.m. I opened my laptop and reviewed what I knew legally about removing long-term guests. As a criminal defense attorney, property law wasn't my specialty, but I didn't need a specialty to know I was within my rights. They were not tenants. They had no lease. They paid nothing. They contributed nothing. By 3 a.m., I'd scheduled a locksmith for the next evening. By 4 a.m., I'd made a list of every item in the house that was mine, almost everything. By 6 a.m., I brewed coffee and watched the sun paint the sky in soft oranges I hadn't noticed in months. At 7 a.m., I knocked on the master bedroom door. Arthur opened it in a robe that wasn't his. "What now?" He snapped. "I'm reminding you," I said, calm and steady. "You have 24 hours left." He scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I've been patient. You're experiencing the difference." Brooke sat up in bed, hair wild, eyes wide. "You're really doing this?" she demanded. "Yes," I said. Evelyn appeared at the bathroom doorway, clutching her robe. "Daisy, sweetheart, don't do something you'll regret." "I regret letting it get this far," I told her. Then I walked away. They spent the morning in quiet chaos. Doors opened and shut. Suitcases zipped. Cabinets slammed. No one approached me. By noon, their strategy changed. They gathered in the living room like a tribunal. Arthur tried to reason. Evelyn pleaded. Brooke accused me of jealousy. "I'm not jealous," I said slowly. "I'm exhausted." No one had an answer for that. By early evening, they were still there. Still arguing, still pretending the consequences weren't real. I picked up my phone, dialed the non-emergency line, and let it ring. Arthur's face drained of color. Before I could finish, he hissed, "Fine, we'll go." For the next 2 hours, I watched them pack. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. Evelyn wrapped dishes she'd bought without asking, muttering about how ungrateful I was. Arthur stomped through the house like a king forced from his throne. Brooke slammed drawers so loudly I thought they'd crack. The louder they were, the calmer I felt. At 9:23 p.m., they stood at the front door with their bags. Evelyn turned to me. "I hope you're happy," she whispered. "I hope I will be," I said. Noah's car pulled up, and Brooke left without a word. Arthur stepped into the cold night. I shut the door, locked it, and leaned my forehead against the wood. For the first time in years, the house, the air, the silence were mine. I walked every room they'd taken over. There were dents, stained scratches, but under it all, the bones of my life were still there. I breathed slowly. Peace didn't arrive like a celebration. It arrived like a long exhale I hadn't realized I'd been holding for 3 years. The first morning alone felt unreal. I woke expecting footsteps, Brooke's voice, Arthur's cough, Evelyn clattering dishes. There was nothing. Just the soft hum of the heater and a patch of sunlight warming the foot of my bed. My bed in my reclaimed master bedroom. I made coffee. Real quiet. Not the tense, performative kind we'd suffocated under. Later that week, Ruby stopped by. She looked around like she was seeing the house for the first time. "You look 10 years lighter," she murmured. I hadn't noticed, but she was right. The house breathed, and so did I. Bills shrank back to normal. My fridge stayed full. My car stayed where I parked it. Then, almost 3 weeks later, the phone rang at 2:08 a.m. I knew before I looked who it was. Brooke. Her voice trembled. "Daisy, I need help." Those words hit harder than the ultimatum because they were real. Not manipulative, not smug. Real fear and real desperation. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I'm pregnant," she said, voice shaking that my heart dropped, not out of panic, but out of recognition. This was the moment my family always used to use to pull me back in. A crisis, a plea, a demand wrapped in vulnerability. Old instinct surged. Fix it, save her. Swallow myself so she could breathe. But Dr. Leia's voice rose louder. "If you rescue her from her choices, she never learned to stand." "Brooke," I said, studying my voice, "I'm sorry you're scared. I really am. But I can't be your only safety net anymore." A small sob. "So you're abandoning me?" "No," I said softly. "I'm giving you resources, not my life." I told her about programs, assistance options, places that help women exactly in her situation. Practical steps, not self-sacrifice. She cried harder. Then the line went quiet. She didn't say goodbye. I didn't call back Dot in the weeks that followed. Updates trickled in. Brooke moved into a maternity support program. She found part-time work at a daycare. She was managing. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but managing. For the first time, she did it without me breaking myself to hold her up. Boundaries don't feel triumphant. They feel clean. Painful sometimes, but clean. A year has passed since that night in my dining room. My parents now rent a modest studio on the north side of the city. Arthur works part-time at a hardware store. Evelyn does remote data entry. They're not thriving, but they're standing on their own feet. Maybe for the first time in decades, Brooke had her baby, a little boy. I've only seen photos pass quietly through my grandmother, but he looks healthy and peaceful, untouched by the battles that shape the adults around him. Brooke still struggles, but she's working. She's learning. She's doing it without assuming someone else will sacrifice their life so she can avoid discomfort. As for me, my home is quiet. My savings are intact. My mornings are mine again. For the first time, I'm building a life that doesn't require shrinking myself to make room for people who never plan to make room for me. If this story hits something familiar in you, tell me where you're listening from. If you've ever had to choose yourself, share your story below. And make sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss what comes next.